Okay, welcome. Hi. Can you hear me? Is this working? Hello, hello. I find a joke. I'm just going to stomp it to death. Okay, you only have 15 more minutes of bad David jokes, so you'll miss me when you're gone. You will. Oh, I miss David's dad jokes. I'm David. I'm the king of the dad joke. I'm the program director here, pronouns he, him, his. Welcome. We have a great faculty event for you tonight. Everybody having a good week so far? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, we have a full house. I'm committed to a wave. There's only one more week of workshops. We're going to start over here. That was like a total Buddhist wave. That was really, it's like, oh, we're present and we're being, that was lovely in a very spiritual sort of way. Okay. Tell me to stop, just really. Great lineup. We're going to hear from writer Sarah Schulman. Big round of applause. There she is right there. Poet Tina Chang. And printmaker Fred Liang. Woo! Ow! Great week, great lineup. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to heap some houses. Housekeeping, it's a thing. Look on YouTube. It's not, I'm just making that up. Okay, student night. The sign-up sheet is looking good. It could be a lot better. We haven't quite gotten to the second page yet. And I know you're like, ooh, should I do it? But, you know, Sarah, should people sign up? Yep. Maybe a little more enthusiasm than that, maybe, but it's like good. Sign up. You won't be sorry. That's all I'm going to say about it. I might say something more about it, but not now. Tina and Sarah will be signing books in the back after the talk at that table right there. The books are for sale at the back of the room. We also have books of the other faculty of the week back there, plus some beautiful, sparkly new t-shirts, new design this summer. Check it out. If you're here with a scholarship, I don't know if you know this, but you get 30% off of everything. So check it out. It's we want to make it possible for you to walk away with a really sweet piece of t-shirt swag. If you haven't been in the gallery yet, the summer exhibition, To Move a Mountain, curated by former fellow Cody Brown, is wonderful and beautiful. Check it out if you haven't done so already. Features the work of 8 or 10 former fellows. I would like to give a shout out, as I always do at this point, to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation for so generously supporting our summer programming, public programming. Restrooms are still down the hall. We have assisted listening devices at the back. If that would make your evening more fruitful and pleasant, please check with Hannah. She'll get you hooked up with that. Turn your cell phones off. Please see how I'm like getting through this really efficiently and without undue stupid jokes. Turn off your phone. And then with that, I would like to invite one of Sarah's students up to the stage to introduce Sarah Schulman. Please welcome Gwen Bartleman. Come on up to the stage.
Good evening. Thank you all so much. When I volunteered to introduce Sarah Schulman, Dustin provided me with his bio. Sarah Schulman is a novelist, playwright, screenwriter, nonfiction writer, and AIDS historian. Her 21st book, The Fantasy and Necessity of Solidarity, is published by PenguinRandomHouse imprint Thesis Books. Schulman is on the advisory board of Jewish Voice for Peace and holds an endowed chair at Northwestern University. Dustin also asked me to make the intro into something more personal than just reading her bio. So, in the 1980s and 1990s, I came up smack dab in the middle of the queer scene in Toronto. Like many Torontonians, we were fully inspired by New York City and borrowed deeply from them. And it was here that I first heard the name Sarah Schulman. Schulman was a co-founder of the Lesbian Avengers. I fell in love with their unapologetic politics infused with humor, and their images, like the old-fashioned drawing of a bomb with a long wick and the timeless slogan, "We recruit." Toronto held its first official Dyke March in 1996, and I remember seeing more than one Avengers t-shirt on that day. Schulman was an active member of ACT UP, and we mirrored their die-ins in Toronto, and this was a really powerful and important moment in Canadian queer activism. And as it was then, it is now. Sarah Schulman's writing was and is a constant, prolific, impactful, witty, imaginative, inspiring, and skillful. When the opportunity arose to come to FOC to enroll in a workshop with Sarah Schulman, I signed up, I was accepted, and I immediately thought, what on earth have I done? I had little reason to worry. Since Monday, I have gleefully shared space with 9 other writers as we experience guidance, support, and beautiful pedagogy. As a teacher, Sarah Schulman is caring, tough-ass, pragmatic, gentle, direct, knowledgeable, and quotable. Referring to our expressed fear of edits, she said, "It's not like a painting. You can't ruin it." She told us that we were living in a fascist cataclysm and that art changes how we think. About one of her books, she explained, "For 2 years I was writing, and I didn't know what I was writing. I just did it." Talking about the importance of drafts, she instructed us to do it again until the truth comes out. And she told us to put ourselves into our writing, asking, "Why do you want to put a wall between us and you?" All of this and more, and kindly keep in mind, it's only Wednesday. It is not a small thing to retain absolute relevance and inspiration over decades, and she has done just that. Please join me in welcoming the incomparable Sarah Schulman.
Thank you. I'm going to read exactly the same thing as I read last year because I want to say it again. The zone of interest. I'm reading my Twitter, now X. I have 2 frantic feeds, neither of which knows the other exists. One, a devoted multitude of posts about the Tony Awards of 2024, unfolding that evening on television. Counterposed is an international, devastated, angry, desperate feed about ongoing shattering of lives and futures in Gaza. These 2 conversations and experiences never seem to meet. I keep checking the posts about the Tony Awards to see if anyone says anything concerning the world or even our own nation. Finally, one winner calls for more arts funding, how it is a requirement for a civilized society. But a few months before the Oscars was a little different. The winner in the category of international feature film was The Zone of Interest, a co-production of the UK, Poland, and the United States. Now, on the surface, The Zone of Interest is a Holocaust film about the Nazi commandant of Auschwitz, whose family home, where he raised his children, shared a wall with the extermination camp he oversaw. The film never enters the camp. We see the smoke, we hear some sounds, but the point of view lies strictly with the Nazi family on this side of the wall. On this side of the wall, they have a swimming pool, while the invisible people on the other side have no food. The people on this side, they eat healthy, opulent meals. They give their children expensive presents. We never see the others, but we know they are being exterminated. Had the zone of interest functioned only on the level of this story I just described, it would have been an exquisitely executed retread of information we already know and are in some ways comfortably familiar with. But there is a unique experience to watching this film, that wall. After a while as we watch, the past and present resonate, and then they begin to merge. But all the transformation takes place inside us, the viewers. The film's narrative stays in the past, but its meaning engulfs the present. That wall becomes the Israeli separation wall, where one side fills swimming pools, while on the other side Palestinians have no water. One side controls the other, while tucking their children into sleep in comfortable beds and now that side is eliminating the other. The winner, director and writer Jonathan Glazer, then takes this moment of personal recognition and, almost trembling, not with happiness, but with fear, he makes the following statement, quote, "All our choices were made to reflect and confront us in the present. Not to say, look what they did then. Rather, look what we do now. Our film shows where dehumanization lands at its worst. It's shaped all of our past and present. Right now we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people, whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel, or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all the victims of this dehumanization, how do we resist?" End quote. Now, in many ways, this is a modest statement. That the intense violence, murder, and cultural destruction that Jews experienced historically by Nazis produced the violence against Palestinians that Israel is committing today, that is a well-known interpretation of the cycle of violence, a frequent explanation of the current cataclysm, one that equates Israeli and Palestinian suffering. Glazer's work had already made that statement. He wasn't coming to the stage like many predecessors, winning for repetitive familiar content, awkwardly squeezing in some unrelated political comment after thanking their agents. But I wondered if the people in the film industry who voted for him fully realized what the film was actually about, how intentional the dual meaning. I wonder how many of them thought it was only about the victimization of the Jews and not also about the victimization by us. I wondered if there were people out there who thought The Zone of Interest was a sensitive, searing film only about bad Nazis and poor us. Of course, he had to be punished for being one of the few public figures to speak the simple truth on American television, the truth that the entertainment and media industries had so studiously avoided that it sounded strange. That was March 10th, 2024. By March 18th, over 1,000 Jewish creatives and professionals signed their names to a public denunciation of Jonathan Glazer. Signers included prominent actors, executives, creators, directors, producers, and agents. They wrote, quote, "The use of words like occupation to describe an indigenous Jewish people defending a homeland that dates back thousands of years and has been recognized as a state by the United Nations distorts history," end quote. The United Nations does recognize the state of Israel, and it also recognizes that Israel has occupied Palestinian land. To quote from the UN official document, The Question of Palestine, quote, "In the 1967 war, Israel occupied Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem," end quote. I was surprised that so many powerful and intelligent people's first objection was to Glazer stating the globally recognized and simple fact that Israel has militarily occupied land where Palestinians currently live or formerly lived before they were militarily displaced. It is irrefutable that Palestinians' lives are controlled by Israel and they are occupied. I would have expected the signers to justify that occupation, not to claim that it doesn't exist. Equally peculiar is that so many worldly and in many cases secular people would use biblical justification for Jewish dominance of land that is inhabited by more than one people. Yes, it is certainly true that there have been Arab Jews coexisting with Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, and Druze throughout different empires and collective histories. Jews were an integrated part of the Arab world before the current created false binary of Jews versus Arabs. In fact, 40 to 50% of Jews in Israel are of Arab origin, from a range of nations including Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, Morocco, and Palestine. And so Arab Jews were among the range of peoples indigenous to the region, but for over 1,000 people who have significant roles in the corporate creation of American arts and entertainment to think that Jews are the only indigenous people to that area or that European Jews are indigenous to the Middle East simply doesn't make any sense. The letter further stated that these 1,000 Jews believe that Glazer's statement, quote, gives credence to the modern blood libel that fuels a growing anti-Jewish hatred around the world, end quote. Blood libel is an anti-Semitic claim originating in the Middle Ages, falsely accusing Jews of vampirishly using the blood of Christian children to make Passover matzah. It is pretty crazy that so many people were willing to sign a letter interpreting Glazer's call for an end to using the Holocaust to justify murdering Palestinians as the same as him saying that Jews kill Christian children to make matzah. Medieval Jews, who were a vulnerable and often blamed minority, did not kill Christian children, but the 1,000 signers were betraying an unconscious association because Israelis with American money are killing children daily and in large numbers. I'm sitting in LA across the table from an old friend and I love and respect. She is so upset about Israel's violence in Gaza. She is devastated. She looks around to make sure no one in the restaurant can hear her criticize Israel. She won't sign anything. She won't say anything in public. It could hurt her professionally. This is a common response from many people in entertainment who I consider to be friends. They are afraid to say what they believe to be true because of the 1,000 people who signed their names and the 1,000 more who didn't sign but feel the same way. My feeling is that, yes, doors will close, but those people do not control everything. Other doors will open. In some strange way, my silent friends believe the myth that the Zionist Jews control all the entertainment industries. I, on the other hand, do not believe that. Let's face it, if my friend was correct, you would not be reading this book right now, and it wouldn't have been published by Penguin Random House. It takes until April 5th to gather 500 signatures to a new document carefully titled Jewish Creatives Supporting Jonathan Glazer's Oscars Speech. Quote, "We honor the Holocaust by saying never again for anyone. We should be able to name Israel's apartheid and occupation without being accused of rewriting history," end quote. Actors, writers, producers, showrunners, directors, and members of the Israeli film industry signed. Some of the names include Deborah Winger, Todd Haynes, Chloe Feynman, Elliot Gould, Joaquin Phoenix, Joel Cohn, Hari Neff, James Seamus, Mike Lee, Wallace Shawn, Annie Baker, Naomi Foner, Miranda July, Naomi Klein, Jonathan Latham, Benjamin Moser, Morgan Spector, Lynn Tillman, and many others, and me. Thank you.
Let's keep clapping for Sarah Schulman. Thank you so much. Words we all need to hear and think about. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you also to Gwen for a wonderful introduction. There you are. Thank you. And now I would like to invite to the stage one of Tina's students, Yolanda, to introduce Tina Chang. Please come on up.
Hey, y'all. My first time meeting Tina Chang was also my introduction to the Fine Arts Work Center 2 summers ago through her workshop, Hybrid Poetry, Liminal Spaces, Sensual Blur. In August 2023, I'd only recently become reacquainted with my work after a long and painful estrangement. Coming to Provincetown in Falk was dynamic and overwhelming in innumerable ways. But it was between class meetings that I recommitted to my personal future based on a confidence that Tina helped cultivate in me. A confidence that reminded me that I was brave, that I was capable enough to do what needed to be done, In a workshopping space, Tina is grit and fire, buff and balm. The readings, exercises, and discussions that she guides poets through are selected and facilitated with intention, expertise, and deep kindness. Her radical vulnerability as an educator and sister poet are a gift and a model. This year's workshop is the capstone for some heavy lifting I've been doing as an artist. And Tina has encouraged me and my work, all of our work, in ways she cannot know. She is a poet's poet and a teacher's teacher. Tina Chang is the author of 3 books, Hybrida in 2019, Of Gods and Strangers 2011, and Half-Lit Houses from 2004. She is also co-editor of the W.W. Norton anthology, Language for a New Century, Contemporary Poetry from the Middle East, Asia, and Beyond. Her poems have been published in journals such as American Poet, McSweeney's, The New York Times, and Plowshares. She has received awards from the Academy of American Poets, the New York Foundation for the Arts, Poets and Writers, among others. She is professor of English and the director of creative writing at Binghamton University. When I think of Tina Chang, my mind calls up the power of what if, the power of knocking and asking, the power of glue sticks and scissors and just making it up. And by it, I mean a poem. And by it, I mean opportunity. And by it, I mean a life of dreaming by hand. And by hand, I mean standing in the stream of time and setting a goal, just one little goal. And by goal, I mean purpose. And by little, I mean the world. It is my absolute joy to introduce my colleague, my teacher and my friend, Tina Chang.
That is the best introduction I have ever gotten in my life, hands down. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Yolanda. Thank you so much. In terms of scissors and glue, there is power in that. And you are right. So I'm going to tell you what my goal is for the students for Friday. They have to print out their entire manuscript by Friday. I mean, their entire thing. And I'd like to inspire everybody else to do that too, because it's just printing out we've probably been working on for a really long time. And my idea is don't keep it stuck inside your laptop. Bring it out, see what happens. I just did the same thing, so I'm going to show you what I did, okay? And then we can all do it together. All right. So it's going to be a little bit of a journey. I'm going to try to do it as quickly as I can. I am really attracted to books that are not books. Anybody know Anne Carson's work? I love it that she approaches everything as a sort of a journey of the mind, thinking about what a book could possibly be. This is an accordion-style book. It is a book dedicated to the memory of her brother who died, but he was estranged. You can unfurl it. She asks you to throw it down a flight of stairs. She asks you to take a pencil to the other side of it, which is blank, and write your own book. She asks you to put it on its side so it becomes then a gravestone. Here's where the scissors and the glue comes in. Everybody do it tonight. Take out some scissors and some glue, because you can take some postage stamps and basically the sort of archival materials of your life and make something completely unknown to you and interesting. And this is what I love about her. I've also, so this objects, letters. This is where also the scissors come in. This is a letter from her brother, who was estranged from the family, and also a known Catullus poem at the bottom. Also, everybody should know this book. It's Citizen. by Claudia Rankin. So one of my favorite collections, and she also uses text and color. This sharp, black, dense, beautiful text set against this bright white background. And also, if you ever had a chance to touch the book, it's shiny and white, and just the contrast itself says so much. Even before you've read the words, I feel most colored when I am thrown against a sharp white background. And this is said over and over and over on the page, an insistence of this message, which needs to be heard. I am also inspired by seal script. I am inspired by Chinese characters, that in Chinese characters, when you take away even one stroke, it completely changes the meaning of the word. And here, the Chinese character for soldier, and when one stroke is taken away, it changes the entire meaning. So it's meant to have collisions of sounds and gunshots. And the character means, in the middle means mound or hill, and they're battling against each other. Chen Li, who wrote this, called War Symphony, actually has a video where the characters are actually physically battling each other. There's so much innovation in poetry from around the world. This is from my students and for my students. So when I work with students all year round, the end project is always make a book. So they have no other choice with me than make a book. So this is from a student who had worked with me, who was a Korean American adoptee, searched for scrolls all over New York City, and this is what they came up with. This is from another student of mine who used archival photographs, maps, fabric, some of them controversial, but they've utilized other books to make the existing books to make their books. Another student of mine, Devi, is from India, and she had childhood memories of riding on the train and having little coasters and treats in a little box. And she decided to replicate that, and she hand crocheted all of these, and these are 18-year-olds, hand crocheted all of these coasters to be able to create these poems on the back of them. So these are just, this one's very special. This is from a student of mine who decided to do the anti-book and decided to hand stitch poems into a pair of pants. And it's particularly, it's whimsical on the one hand, but it's also quite weighted because they had suffered through a very violent act, and they were attacked when they were in these pair of in this pair of pants. They decided to store the pants away all the way back in the closet. And when I brought up this idea of make a book, they decided to make a book out of their lives and just stitch this in a pair of pants, their messages, and it became something that she was really traumatized by, but then she reclaimed it as a powerful act of art. Students of mine create poems, both in writing as well as on a sort of an online platform. I'm just going to read. This is an 18-year-old. I carry the new men that have found my bed, body in the sinews of Egyptian cotton, by the space between each finger, trying to spread me at the seam. But the slip-stitch tightens, nonetheless left begging of these men, breed in me a language of adoration, for I have no tongue. I mean, this is an 18-year-old thinking of all these different places and spaces. And just today I was speaking to my students. We talked about the act of, if you don't know what shape the poem is going to be, keep pouring it and pouring it and pouring it into different vessels until something feels right. So I can say, this is my collection that's back there, and I think I'm going to read a couple of poems from this. This is, my son has been here. This is my son Roman. This is his silhouette. And the collection of poetry follows a young boy from birth until about the time he's about 8 years old. He's a mixed race black child who I have raised, and everything about his existence has recast my own existence. So it really is a story of love, of motherhood, of fatherhood, anybody who's ever taken care of anyone else. So I think I will, Oh, first, you should know I was obsessed with this idea of fairy tales. Raise your hand if you've read Grimm's fairy tales. Grimm fairy tales, very grim. I was very, don't know why. I do know why. Maybe we could all get into a conversation as to why were these stories told to children, especially around bedtime. Here's the wolf, like, eating Riding Hood. I love the sense of scale in fairy tales, how very small beings can become monstrous. I was also very invested in the character of the witch as well as the hunter. And I asked myself, who is the modern day hunter? Who is then the predator in the lives of young black boys and young boys in general? So I felt like I'm going to read to you. I'm just going to have it on a blank page so we could listen to the poem. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you. I will read to you. This is called Milk. And it's from a Maurice Sendak book called In the Night Kitchen. Anybody remember this? One of my child's favorites. Milk. Milk in the batter. Milk in the batter. We bake cake and nothing's the matter. Milk. In every definition of home, my son conjures milk. The sun is milk. Milk spills through open doorways, bed of warm milk, face of milk, milk trousers, a truck full of milk. A milky light passes through the lens of my camera. All of his young life, my son thought of milk, and he asked for it each night. In every memory I have of him, his hands are outstretched, and he's asking for his last bottle. In every version of a life, I never refuse him. On the television, the nation listens to the story of Libby Kletsky. Today, I think of his mother who waited for him, allowing him for the first time to walk home alone. That morning, he held a key, heavy and shining, made especially for him. In the ancient story of boys, he headed up the street past the lone dog barking near the fire hydrant, past the circle of children careening into their own shadows. And in the ancient story of boys, he walked through his front door, and this was his rite of passage. He placed his book bag on the coffee table, and the boy and the mother sat together in the large reading chair in the living room light. But this version isn't true. Tonight, I hold my son closer. As I put on his night clothes, I'm afraid of the world. I find all the stories horrifying. In the book of nursery rhymes, the old woman sends her son to bed without food. A king beats a knave for stealing pies, and the dog cannot find his bone, though he runs in circles day after day. Perhaps if I rewrite all the old stories, a new era will begin. Era of the forgiven, era of redemption, era of safekeeping. Tonight, milk stains my blouse, a love so deep it runs from me. After all the old stories are finished, my son says, the story again. I open the book. The owls lift from the pages. The lake is a bowl of night milk, and this a place so safe. We are weightless, buoyant in its murky sweetness, free from a promise that each new day startles us alive. And that's the story of Libby Kletsky, who asked to walk home alone, and he never made it home alive. And so his spirit was calling to me a lot during the course of writing this book. I'm inspired by visual art, always, always, always. I wish I hadn't put down who the painter is, because I like to ask, who is this? We all probably should know if you are an art buff. It is Kehinde Wiley, and he named it the same title as the original, called Napoleon Leading the Army Over the Alps. If you want to see this in person, it's actually at the Brooklyn Museum. You should measure it up against the original. Anybody feel like they are familiar with the right side of the page? You should. This is a very famous painting of Napoleon. Fun fact, Napoleon is not this large. So Napoleon was known, that's like Napoleon complex. He was a very small man. And so he insisted on being painted very large as the horse, larger than the horse, which it's not to scale. So then Kehinde Wiley wanted to recast black male characters in a similar scene to ask us why aren't black characters, why aren't black men in these sort of majestic paintings? Where are they in history? This is by Alexandria Smith. This is Go Tell That. This is the first time I've noticed the ribbon on the right side of the picket fence. Alexandria Smith's work focuses on the reformation of bodies. Sometimes the hands appear where the sort of butt is, and the butt appears where the hands are, and all of the appendages seem to be placed in sort of unfamiliar spaces to ask the question, how have we viewed or distorted the black body, and in whose view is this? And it's set against the white picket fence and this very ornate background. And then this is, of course, for anybody who's an art buff, is Kara Walker, Emancipation Approximation. These are larger than life projected on walls. And when I was a very young person, this inspired me so much as I was surrounded by this history that I had to confront. And so I started to make work surrounding it. Of course, one of the dangers of doing this always is appropriation, which is something that I very much kept on my mind. I always kept my voice as the mother's voice who loves the sun so much. And so I'll just read this one. Each breath makes me a billow, worn like rain, spiraling out into a vision of winter. If history teaches me anything, it is of the vagaries of burden. I can carry a vessel, a pitcher of water, a bundle of ideas like sticks. I carry time like fire. I hiccup and it's 2025, though the faces are the same, faces without faces and with different names. If I run, the threat of a storm above slows me. If I lift my head, the rains spill down. If I bend, my spine becomes a terrain on which another treads. Sometimes I wish to unborn myself from this weather. If I could walk out from under this thunder, there would be such air. My posture too would lift. If I unborn myself, I give up my sisters too, my brothers by the bridge. So I'll stay lifting this largeness, this brightness of darkness, to live inside my cloud of kin. So I'll move forward. So to the next project. So all of that I might have shared in the past, but I wanted to share what I've been doing. So this is for Joanne, because I feel like Joanne, when whoever was here for Joanne and yesterday, Kelly, Beers, everybody's wonderful presentations last night, I felt a kinship with Joanne's experiences of being at a residency. So this is my residency in Hermitage. It's in Florida, which has suffered a lot. There's been a lot of storms that have since torn down some of these cabins. So I feel fortunate to have made work in the space. Some of the wilderness speaks to me. Raise your hand if sometimes you feel more comfortable among foliage and plants and wildlife than people. As I get older, I'm like that because I don't have to speak sometimes, and it makes me feel comforted to be around plants and sand. And so this is some of the atmosphere or some of the things that I got to see every night and this is also my space that I worked in, which was really, really similar to Joanne's. And I love the physicality that is available for writers. So writers, if you've ever been jealous of visual artists, you yourself can too be physical with your work, and I will show you. I've been talking about it with my class. This is my neighbor. This is my neighbor's cabin that I was able to sort of walk to every day, and at the end of the day, we would just get together for a little bit of wine and talk about what we created that day. This is the physicality. If you are a writer, by Friday, I encourage you to just print out everything, and if we can't use up all the paper at FOC, don't do that. Then we should all at least put things together in a file of things that we plan to print out when we get back home. So when I am unsure about my work, I print it out and I put it on the wall. I don't always have the real estate to do this because this is at a residency. So I sometimes pin it up, and in my home, I tape it up on the wall. I've done this ever since my first book to allow myself space to be able to dream in very physical ways. I've always wanted to be a visual artist, and I've always wanted to use paints, and I wanted like paint underneath my fingernails. And since I couldn't do that, I did this. I also worked with visual artists. During this time, I found them, and they found me. What I can say is, and then I wanted to bring up what I did after this. I started writing in a lot of my current work. So my next collection is called Lion, and it's coming out in 2026. And this was the line that sort of got me going. It was in the details. The women were disappearing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. I made this, and I know that I made this with Fred. When I was in Fred's workshop, Fred last year, 2 years ago, invited my poetry students into his class, and so we made prints. And I was so proud of this print. This is by Hong Zhang, and this is the original, what I envisioned that my cover would be like. And I made a blue print of it, though this is the original. Hong Zhang makes work that is focused on hair. And in this case, the woman is, the Asian American woman is faceless, and her hair is wrapped around her face like a mask, and this is called pandemic hairdo. And I was so interested in this vision of a faceless Asian American woman, and it spoke to this whole idea of, I don't know what I have next, but it spoke to this whole idea of visibility and invisibility for Asian American women in the United States. I largely wrote this next book that's coming out soon during the pandemic. And I wrote it after Christina Lee was murdered in her Chinatown apartment. And I think it was 2020. She was followed into her Chinatown apartment, and she was stabbed over 40 times. And then when the memorial was put up in front of her home, that was destroyed too. So a group of Asian American female artists got together and made work and started to really gather around her memory. So I secretly started to make works surrounding their work, not telling them that I was doing this. I basically found all the women that were a part of this show, and they were living all over the world, and I started to make my work. I love this idea of like not knowing what you're making. If you don't know what you're making, you're in the most perfect spot ever, because that's always where I start. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know that I saw this image, and I was very interested in it. And then I saw another image, and I was very interested in that. So this is a still by the artist Hong An Truong. And she was taking stills from American GIs. American GIs were recording Vietnamese women without their knowledge during the Vietnam War. So I made work surrounding this. And then I made work surrounding Joan Achim. Like she makes this work that looks like bodies layered on top of bodies on top of bodies. This was actually the artist's mother washing her hair, but she was really interested in how it looked like torture, and she didn't mean for it to look that way. And I'll just show you. And this was I've Gone to Look for America, and this is by Hannah Yu. They were all part of the same show. And this is this is guns that Hannah Yu made with rice paper dipped in soy sauce. And her parents owned a soy sauce factory, so she grew up with the smell of soy sauce, like really kind of circulating in her imagination, in her nostrils. And I learned that soy sauce was predominantly made by women, so it's a female act. And then she researched the guns that were most utilized in the United States for mass shootings. In this case, the shooting of the Atlanta spa shootings. And she made this work surrounding it. So this gun and this gun were two of the three guns that she created. And then very lastly, this is called For Ornamental Purposes, Astria Superrock. She makes artwork that surrounds the idea of of a futuristic. Like, do you ever notice that when you're watching futuristic films, they always have like this kind of quasi pseudo like Asian quality to them, where like a lot of the Asian characters aren't even Asian characters. They're just sort of strokes, and they populate it in these neon signs, and there's always like an Asian evil character, and then they're all fighting in the an alleyway where there's like usually somebody making soup dumplings, and then everybody's like thrown out of the way, and they're and then usually the person who wins or is the hero is not Asian at all. So all these artists are incredibly fascinating to me. So I thought I would just read two poems. Two poems. This is called The Document of Invisibility. I'll just read one, I think. The Document of Invisibility. The Document of Invisibility states that I must first recollect the beginning of my erasure, which would summon me to a crag where I stand before my birth. Thousands of years ago, there existed a farmland, a kingdom, and a grave site where a fire was built. Around a burial site, there was shaped a ritual with fire at the center. If I moved my hand to close it, too close to it, it didn't burn, warmed by the light of an ancestor who was raised on the precipice of darkness. In the space of razor existence, it seemed both plausible and impossible that I would be born. A very strong wind blew. It set ablaze the trees, and in time, a wildfire. It was from this tragedy that I found my origin. From it, I emerged, untouched by flame but smoldering, watchful and wary, but sheltered from burning. I came from this colossal heat which touched an original darkness. I was born an ember of wanting. It was destined for the seekers to search for this threat of desire. The disappearances were inevitable. So I can say that it follows this character from the beginning to the end. It ends actually on this image of disappearances. And I think like in our present culture where people are actually being caused to disappear, it speaks to this disappearance, who is asked or who is forced to disappear and why. And each of us are sort of at the other end of it at some point. It just depends on who. And I'll end on newest work, and that is a very short poem called Paradise. I didn't come here last summer because my husband has stage 4 lung cancer, and last year we had just discovered that he had that diagnosis before I came here, so I apologize to my students who I wasn't here for, but the journey continues now, so this I've written more than half of this collection that is devoted to him. You should know that in this poem, this son has grown up. He's about to leave for Japan. So him leaving and my son and my husband being in stage 4 is kind of all coming together at the same time. Paradise. It doesn't happen suddenly. It is quiet here. Your thin arm bent in the wind. Your back to me now, like a shepherd's. You don't eat. A spoonful of rice, and you're full. I insist on the scale. Insist on each drink. I will make sure you're better. Our son, now grown, will journey soon, elsewhere and far. I miss him and miss you at once. Together, you make an avalanche of sorrow when all the leaves let go on a single autumn day, heaps of it, solemn, abundant, and cruel. Each hue of red veils me in desire. No one thinks they've lived enough. The cut hydrangea by the window soothes my kind. I will never stop wondering how much more we could have loved. When our son enters, he is small again, hands empty, wet with rain. Thank you.
Wow. Tina Chang, let everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Yolanda, for that beautiful introduction. That was wonderful. Okay, finally, I'm going to invite one of Fred's students, Megan Biddle, to the stage to introduce Fred Liang. Please welcome to the stage.
I'm actually not Megan. No. But I can speak on behalf of Megan and all of us, I think, in our class. I am Ann Cowie, and I'm honored to be introducing Fred, which I actually did last year, and I said I didn't need to do it again this year, but here I am. Thank you, Dustin. So, honored to be introducing Fred on behalf of all the class, Megan included. Fred is a master printer, an educator, and an artist, and he is we're having a fantastic week with him. He is supportive, generous with his expertise, and particularly generous with his time. He's full of stories. He's encouraging risk-taking and often says, well, let's test it when we're wondering if a particular material works. And as we are all exploring our different images, our creative goals, as clear or as amorphous as they may be, and as we experiment and stretch, Fred is with us and encouraging us. While he's meticulous about process and efficiency of steps, likes to do fewer versus more, he also demands that the art come first. And today we had the pleasure of going over, some of us went over to the Schoolhouse Gallery where he has, on Commercial Street, where he has a show on view right now, which was really wonderful to see. So thank you, Fred, for all of that. The details include that Fred has a BFA from the University of Manitoba and an MFA from Yale. His honors include Massachusetts Cultural Council arts grants in painting, printmaking, and works on paper. His work is in numerous public and private collections. And his most recent exhibitions include the Milwaukee Art Museum, the Addison Museum of American Art in Massachusetts, the XC.HuA Gallery in Berlin, XC.HuA Gallery, maybe? And the Jerez de Frontera Gallery at the University of Cadiz in Spain. He's the recipient of the 2020 Joan Michell Foundation grant, the Boston Foundation's Brother Thomas Fellowship in 2021, and he is currently a professor at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, which I might add is the only public arts college in the country. And he has just recently stepped down as chair of the Printmaking Department there, where he had a long tenure in that position. So thank you, Fred, for this week on behalf of all of us, and it's all yours now.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Anne. And thanks for doing it twice. Anyways, it's always hard for me to come up here and to talk to everybody for my work. It's even harder to go after these two amazing writers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pretend none of you guys are here. I'm just gonna talk. Okay. I think the first thing, I think that's a hint on I need to pick up this, right? Is that the hint? And so I'm gonna go based on what that shows, and that shows Fred H.C. Liang. That's me, and I'm gonna give you kind of a basic synopsis in terms of what I'm doing and give you a kind of idea of various things that I do in my art. And one of the things is that I'm known as a printmaker, but I do a lot of different things. So for sake of time, I kind of condense this into just past 2-3 projects so that you get a sense of all the things that I do, all the different kind of art I make. So I'm gonna start with these two paintings. That's how I normally start with, even with a longer talk. And I always start at the source in terms of my inspiration, in terms of aesthetically, conceptually, culturally, and formally. So on the right, this painting by Fang Quan from Song Dynasty, and on the one on the left, one by Wang Mang by in the Yuan Dynasty. So Song and Yuan came right up one after another. So Song was known as the height of Chinese painting period, and Yuan Dynasty was known, coincided to as the Kang Dynasty, Kublai Khan. So that's the dynasty. So one came after another. On the right, the painting evoked everything that I want to say about art: suffering, journey, spirituality, mountain climbing, or going by the mountain, scale, formally, light, space, drama, and the left also has a lot to what I want to say, and the painting on the left has all those qualities, but also has a sense of rebellious struggle, and going up against authority and fighting against invaders, and fighting against history. So two paintings, very different, but the way we look at it, we don't see the subtext of it. So on the right is very philosophical, on the left is very political. So, and also another thing that I show is that these are fun things to do, right? Look at that, paper cut puppies, right? And look, there's another puppy. So a few years ago, I was invited to a collector to, play tennis at their place, and we stayed overnight, and it was Sunday morning brunch, and the TV was on, and all of a sudden, for the first time, the winner of Best in Show was a Pekingese. So, and that had some major consequences in terms of how, and happened to be coincided with an exhibition I did just like a year or so earlier, and all of a sudden, Addison Gallery next day just plastered my work everywhere. Best in Show. And how did that puppy and this Addison Gallery all of a sudden have anything to do with me, right? So going back to it, I was invited to do an exhibition at Addison Gallery, and they want me to come up with a theme, and I came up with a theme that kind of talks about history. And most of my work kind of talks either about philosophy, history, or culture, right? So in this particular exhibition, I'll just make it very quick. Normally, I center on this for much longer. So it's centered on the ceramics and that paper cut in the background, right? So I'm going to just go through this without explaining too much to it, and just give you a sense of the other things that I've done, and the two portraits on the far in the middle, in the far side, it's a couple prints based on silhouettes of Buddha heads, and even though it looked kind of decorative, but it was making a stylistic comparison between two Buddha heads that evoked the distance and the connection, both the distance and the connection historically in China has with the West. So the one on the far right is about 3rd century BC, 3rd century Common Era Buddha head from Afghanistan. And the one on the left is Ming Dynasty Buddha head from China. Both of them are Buddhas, but both of them, the earlier Chinese Buddha heads more like the one on the right, and later ones on the left. But the origin of that came from the West, not just India, but stylistically, it came from Macedonia. So the trade between China and the West goes far, far for millennia, right? So here we are in 2025. One of the biggest thing in politics is 100%, no, make it 1,000% terrace. No, let's make it a 6,000% terrace, right? On somebody that, some country, right? So China is still very much at the heart of the discussion in politics. So I made this exhibition that centered around that exchange between the East and West, and how that's been going on for millennia, right? And everything in this exhibition has something to do with it, whether culturally, economically, or militarily, right? So this is an image of, and currently I'm actually working on a series of prints that's based on those animals. But this particular image is actually a last battle of the Second Opium War, where the British conquered the Summer Palace and destroyed part of the palace, and destroyed another palace nearby that was marble called Renmingyuan. So that's another story at some other time. So basically, the entire exhibition was result of the end of Opium War and the end of that battle when they killed every Qing dynasty, Qing guards. And what they did after the war was that they took one of these dogs, which belonged to the Empress of China, and they gave the dog as a gift. So it belonged to Empress Dowager, which is essentially at the time was the ruling figure of China. And they gave it to this lovely lady right here, Queen Victoria. And as the Empress Dowager was, kind of dowdy and, somewhat regal, but not elegant. On the contrary to that, Queen Victoria was very elegant and, being presented with this dog. And then, she's very, like European, right? And in actuality, that's what she looked like. And that's the dog. That's the only photograph of the dog that was taken by the British Army and give it to Queen Victoria. And the dog was aptly named Luti. And here's the only painting exists of the dog and still resides at the Buckingham Palace. So based on that narrative, I created this piece right here. And essentially you can kind of see that the dog is kind of embedded within this plethora of foliage, and a lot of it has to do with the things that either led to the Opium War or as a result of the Opium War. So I'm gonna just very quickly go through that and then just show you the rest of the exhibition, and then I'm gonna show you a body of other work that I've done that looks kind of very different. So I do a lot of like a paper cut, and then I convert a paper cut into installations, and I'm going to show you a bunch of them that I've done over the years. And this was what done. This was up at the Groton School, which it's in Western Mass. And the interesting thing about this, I put it up and nobody's seen it because pandemic came, school shut down, and then I had to wait till the end of the pandemic to take it down. So it was, but I did get a couple of nice photographs out of it. And then during the pandemic, before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of like museum shows, and I felt kind of like I felt a little bit caged because I felt like you have to chase museum shows all the time. It just burned out. And then during the pandemic, it was great. I did some off-site, out of ordinary like a museum gallery sterile space, and did some installations. And one of them I was going to show a video of it, but I don't think we have time today. But if anyone's interested, I can send you the link. And also I did this piece in an abandoned building in Boston that's near my house and has since been destroyed, the building anyways. And then I did museum show that's in Massachusetts and mid-Massachusetts and Fitchburg Art Museum. And I did an installation of this a mirror with the world within it, and with a video of of events I took over the years of traveling. And I always wanted to combine these two, and I had a chance to do that in this particular museum. So, and I think this is a video. I don't know how to. Yeah, there it is. So the video just essentially, I'm just capturing these moments that of travel that I've done, and it kind of inspired me to make my work. So I'm gonna end with this particular piece I just finished this year, and it's a public art piece, and it's a piece that was commissioned by formerly called New England Genealogical Society, which has kind of eugenic kind of hit title to it. So they realize it's kind of very dated. So they actually good for them. They actually try to modernize and become more contemporary and be more relevant to today. And they invited me to do a large sculptural piece for the entrance of their new building. And essentially, they want to change the facade and not just the facade, but the whole essence of the museum and make it into more inclusive museum. So, so one of the things that I thought about it is prior to that, most of the history were in the museum were pretty much documented, through lens of the European Americans. So I thought, what better place to start by starting with the text, we're the people, right? So I essentially create a form and send the form to all the friends that I know that speaks another language, and it became enormously amount of people. I just and then so what I did is essentially took that as one of the things that have them translate with the people in their own native tongue, native language. And then I also used Fanfare for the Common Man by Aaron Copland as the string that ties everything together. And lastly, so here's the various languages that I had people write. And interesting enough is that I think the one on the top right, Japanese. I think this is Hindi, and then that's Arabic. And interestingly, and then behind there is I'm blanking. It's Israeli. So Hebrew. Thank you. So interestingly is that and the Arabic text is actually from a student of mine who was a refugee from Lebanon, right? And she tells me the stories about the occupation because her family is originally from Gaza. So she was telling me about the occupation even before October 7th. So she in her own right made a body of work about that. And then the Hebrew is written, I have very close friends are, Jewish. So it was not only that they were Jewish, they were like multilingual Jewish. They were able to write in many languages. So I'm like, oh, great, you can cover a whole bunch of things, right? And then another Jewish friend married to per Indian person, and then I said, well, you can get them to write that. So it just like snowballed into all these like different languages. So I essentially used all that and used Aaron Copland's notes to tie them together, right? Because essentially, as you write text, they kind of float on its own. If you have a period or dot, it's going to float on its own. So I had to come up with a solution. What's better solution than the most American anthem of songs by the most American composer, Eric Copeland, who happened to be son of a Jewish immigrant. right? So it's, for me, the whole thing comes around in circle. And then I created this um, unrolling of the double helix. Like, we only see the double helix as a symbol, but the unrolling of double helix actually looks closer to this than the thing that we're familiar with. So, and I created, commission to make a stainless steel light as an armature to create this piece right here. And this is the final piece that actually went up just this May. So give you, and you can see some of the languages that kind of weaves across. And also in the middle of it, the vertical, in the middle of it is 3 different native language that starts at the center. And then outside of it, it's immigrant language. And these are different views of it. And this is me looking up at it. And then I'm going to end up, this is me with Mr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. And so that was one of my prouder moments. I never thought I'd be that close to a PBS start. So I'm like, all right. So, and he said, yeah, we look alike. I said, yeah, we do. I just need my glasses. So, and then I'm going to give you a few images of the exhibition I have down the street, which is at the Schoolhouse Gallery. If you get a chance, go over. It's up until October 19th. And, you know, it's a nice little show, and I'm very thankful to be part of it. And there are a bunch of other artists in there at the show. That's fantastic. And I was able to have this little project room to the left, and I'm going to put up some of my work that I do in flat, and as well as some new work that for the first time anybody's seen it. So I'm going to go through that, and that'll be my talk. So I'm going to, sorry. So you kind of get the idea of the first 2 paintings, right? And this is kind of reminiscent of the Chinese scroll painting and also paper cut. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred Liang. Big round of applause. Woo! And thank you, not Megan, for the lovely introduction. Sorry again for getting that wrong. I get things wrong sometimes. Can we invite our presenters back up to the stage for a Q&A?
Okay.
If you have a question, wait for Honda to get to you with a mic. We are live casting this, live streaming this, so we want to make sure that everybody who's watching at home can hear your questions. So anybody have a question for our presenters? Joanne.
Thank you to all 3 of you for the amazing work and presentation. I don't know, this is just what popped into my head. How do you start?
I don't know. I've never stopped, so I don't have to start.
Yeah, actually, just kind of dovetail on that. It's to start implying there's a definitive point. So I don't think there was ever a definitive point. So if there was so I guess in a way that if there was a definitive point, maybe sadly there might be a definitive ending. So I don't think, I think my start would be a long journey way back when I was, just a young kid. So, and ironically, what I'm doing now, the paper cut, is something that I started doing when I was a little kid while growing up in China. So that might be the starting point.
Yeah, I've stopped so many times. I'm going to be really honest that I've stopped so many times. Like, I've stopped when I've given birth to children. I've stopped when I was mourning something. I've stopped. I remember stopping very vividly after 9/11 when I felt that my words or my role as a poet wasn't really that clear to me. And almost always I started back up because either of a curiosity or a project that I started for someone else. So for example, after 9/11 and having been in New York City during that time, I was just dead inside. I had nothing really to give. So I felt quite empty. I remember, for anybody, was anybody in New York City during that time? Yeah, I mean, I was glued to the TV set. I was reading the newspapers about everyone's lives, and I totally stopped writing. And then I remember a colleague of mine getting in touch with me to say, I just wanted to get together with you. So we got together on the smallest, everything in New York City is like the smallest patch of grass. It was right under a tree. We got together, and he said, what do you want to do now? What should we do? And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, I have a great idea. He says, why don't we start an anthology, and we are moving around the world, and we are going to collect poems from around the world, and in this way we're all going to be sitting around a table, and it will prove to us that we're all on this creative journey together. And so I said, sure, that doesn't sound like a bad idea, let's go ahead and do that. And then once we did that, I felt like I was honoring the work of all of these writers from Lebanon, from Israel, from China, from Taiwan. I think we had over 65 countries where we collected their work. And I thought, if I could value I would stay up nights, and if I could value their work that much, then there must be something about my own work that maybe I can find a glimmer of interest for, or so by delving into their voices, I felt like I found value again in mine. And it's happened to me quite a few times in my life, because I do stop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan.
The question that's kind of forming for me is, where do you find urgency in your work? Whether it's in the creative process, whether it's the impetus, whether it's getting it out into the world, where in your creating do you feel there's a necessary or even an imposed urgency?
Let me think about it. Okay, go ahead, you guys.
Urgency. So maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. But in art, as an artist, there's an external urgency, which is, exhibitions, and deadlines and things like that. But the best, like I'm thinking of the question, the best time I would ever have making art is when I have no urgency. It's like I'm in the flow of things. That's just me. I don't know about anybody else. And I feel very anxious when there's like a deadline or some sort of urgency. So for me, I guess recall kind of what James Levine said, is that he was asked why he prodigiously played piano every day when he's so accomplished as a conductor. And he said, if I'm not there at front of the piano, and when the angel of creativity strikes you, you miss the moment. So for me, it's not driven by urgency, but it's driven by discipline and habit.
And also, I think that I think what you're speaking to also is presence. You know, you have to be present at your workstation, at the desk, wherever it is that you have decided is your place of communing with yourself. I remember this past year I sought out a spiritual healer because I was going through so much with my spouse, and then just creatively it was starting to really kind of throw me off, and all the things that you saw up on the screen, I was really starting to think, okay, what am I doing with this now? And I sought out the spiritual healer. I said, why am I here in this location, like in this location of upstate New York? What am I doing to find here in this particular space when I'd been in such a creative space like New York City? I was so inspired in New York City. I always had something I had to do, places I had to go, people I had to see, organizations to collaborate with. I had so much going on that it was almost like an imposed creativity. And so now I'm in upstate New York, where there's just so much quiet. I felt like I'm just always under blankets of snow. We talked a lot about snow today. I'm always under blankets of snow. And I asked her, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I doing here? And she said, well, you're not there to find all the activity of the creativity that you thought was in New York City. You're in upstate New York because actually you've found depth, but you haven't recognized it yet. And the moment that you recognize it is when you will feel that state of urgency to push something forward. Because the thing about poetry, which may differ from visual art, which may even differ from prose, because I've noticed in these genres and these art forms, there is sometimes an imposed deadline. There's somebody really waiting on the other side for you to do something. That doesn't exist so much in poetry. You know, like nobody's waiting for anything that you're doing. It's like, all right, you want to give me this thing if you want to, if you insist. So I think in that way, especially for a poet, there has to be sort of like this imposed sort of like flame under you, that what you are creating matters because your existence matters. We talked about this a lot in class. It's like the ancestors, you know, moving all the way through. Why did they survive? What happened? And I try to like go back in my mind, like what had to happen for me to be here? Right, so if enough people survive for me to be here, there must be a reason for why I'm making what I'm making. And then it's not something that comes upon me right away, but something that builds over time. So like as I was finding these artists, each conversation, because I did have conversations with these artists, it started to build more and more and more confidence in me, just having a community around. I think it's important to not completely be alone, and we've talked about this in class, to have maybe one urgent voice with you when you're just about to sort of peter away and you're like, I'm going to give up now. Raise your hand if you've ever thought of giving up in your art form. I mean, thank goodness too for the rest of you who say that you don't. But I definitely have. So I think that community around me too has convinced me that the voice and the vision is urgent.
I don't know what to say.
That's fair.
Maybe one more question?
Yeah. Fred, I loved your expansion into the alphabets of other cultures. I thought that was fascinating. And Tina, I loved your expansion into the visual arts, like incorporating images of Kehinde Wiley, and the Napoleon segment was brilliant, I thought. And I have a question for you, Sarah.
This is my friend over here, Jean.
Say what?
I'm just telling them that we've been friends for over 40 years.
Has it been 40?
Because we were in ACT UP together. Yeah.
Yay, ACT UP. We changed the world. But Sarah, I'm curious. And we're talking about starts. what you have been a analyst and a critic of the Israel-Palestine situation forever. Was there a geopolitical incident that sparked you, and when did it happen? Or was it something personal that you're just like getting on the A train one day and you just said, oh my God, what's going on there? I have to start looking at it and analyzing it. What was like the egg that was laid for this whole?
Well, okay, it's not a short answer.
That's okay.
But thank you for asking that. So I was born in 1958, which is 13 years after the end of the Holocaust, which is not a lot, and I come from a Holocaust family. So I was raised with two different stories. One is that Jews are the victims of the world, which my parents really believed, and they had experienced that to a degree. And the other was that the most dangerous thing on earth is a bystander. And there came some point where those two things were in conflict. And it took me a really long time. I'm actually embarrassed and ashamed how long it took me to really sit down and face what was going on. So in 2011, I had published this book about homophobia in the family. And it was the very first book on that subject. In fact, there was no term, familial homophobia. I had to coin that term because even though it was the most common queer experience in the world, there was no name for it, so people would just call it it. It was just one of these weird things, and I like to make legible invisible structures. That's something that I like to do. So I wrote this book, and I was invited to Tel Aviv University to give a talk. Now, I came from a homophobic Jewish family, and I wanted to give this talk. But a colleague of mine who was Turkish Jew said, you can't go, there's a boycott. And I said, what boycott? So, Palestinians in 2005 started asking internationals to boycott Israeli state-sponsored institutions like universities. But this was 2009, actually, so it had been 4 years, but it hadn't reached me yet. So my colleague was saying, you can't go, there's a boycott. And then she said, well, at least find out about it. So I said, okay, I'll find out about it. But I thought I was going to go. So I wrote to Naomi Klein and Judith Butler. Naomi Klein never answered me. Judith Butler got back to me in 3 hours with all these links and things I needed to read and all this stuff. And I read everything and I realized I can't go, there's a boycott. Right. I realized I would be like crossing a picket line. So I wrote a public letter explaining why I couldn't go. So then I got an email from this guy named Omar Barghouti in Ramallah in the West Bank, and he's one of the leaders of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, one of the leaders of the boycott of Israeli state-sponsored. And he was like, dear Professor Schulman, thank you for your integrity in taking this public stance. And I thought, uh-oh. I don't know what he thinks about gay people. Because, the left in the US had done this with Cuba, right? And not understanding what was going on there. So I was like, oh my God. So I started trying calling everybody and finding it. Anyway, eventually I was put in touch with the Palestinian queer movement, which I didn't even know existed. I mean, I knew there were gay people somewhere. So I talked to two organizations. One was called Al-Kaus, which was a mixed gay group in the West Bank, and the other was called Aswat, which was a queer women's group. And they were like, come on your own dime and do a solidarity tour and only speak at anti-occupation venues. So I said, okay. I mean, the whole time I had no idea what I was doing. I went, the only venue I could speak at was an anarchist vegan cafe. I spoke there, and then this group of Jewish anarchists drove me into Palestine, into the West Bank, this is when they were building the wall, to this village called Bi'alin. And their wall was being built between the village and their olive trees. So they had this demonstration every Friday, don't build this wall. So we go to this demonstration and we're marching around, don't build the wall, whatever. And then the Israeli soldiers come. And I'm looking at them, and of course, I look exactly like them, because if my grandparents hadn't gotten a visa, I would have been them. You know, and I'm not used to Jewish police and things like that, you know. So I'm looking at them, and then they shoot these tear gas at us. We're not doing anything. And the Palestinians carry these cut onions in their pockets. They take them out and start smelling them to override the impact of the tear gas. And suddenly I have this moment like in The Exorcist where her head spins around, and suddenly my internal definition of we changed. From me and these soldier people to me and these people that I just was in this demonstration with. So I go to Ramallah and I meet with the gay Palestinians, and then I meet with Omar. And at this point, I decided that I wanted to do what I could. So I'm like, and this is one of I have made mistakes every single day of this whole solidarity experience. I'm probably making a mistake right now. And this was my first huge mistake. I said, Omar, tell me, what should I do? And he said, you're creative, you'll think of something. Because it's not his job to tell me what my strategy should be, but I didn't know that. Anyway, this whole thing started. So then the gay people said, well, you should bring us to America. So I was like, okay. So I spent a year raising $40,000, and I brought 3 leaders of the queer Palestinian movement to 7 US cities. And they met with like the Black gay community in Chicago and the Arab queer community in the Bay Area and all this stuff. And this is when Facebook was just becoming really hot, and everybody was writing about them and posting pictures with them. And because the gay people here had never had this conversation before. Well, by the time the whole thing was over, it was huge. And Rashid Khalidi, the guy who just got pushed out of teaching at Columbia, you know, the head of Palestinian studies at Columbia, he said, I want to meet these people. He'd never heard of them either, even though he was Palestinian. So we had this meeting where he met these queer Palestinian leaders. And then I said, Rashid, what do you think I should do next? And he said, do a LGBT delegation to Palestine. So then I did that. And the whole thing just started like that. And that's how it's been for 16 years.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Yes, we have a big round of applause for Fred Liang, Tina Chang, and Sarah Schulman. Tina and Sarah will be signing books at the back. Tomorrow night is Thursday night. If you haven't signed up, don't walk over across the way to sign up on the sheet. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.